If you haven't heard by now, quarterback Brendan Sorsby, who most recently played for the Cincinnati Bearcats in the NCAA, is entering the supplemental draft if he is accepted by the NFL into that draft. If you somehow haven't heard, Brendan Sorsby is a 3-year quarterback who started at Indiana and for the last 2 years has played for the Cincinnati Bearcats. He's been a very solid quarterback for this team. He's been a guy that over the last 3 years, at both Indiana and at Cincinnati, he's thrown for over 60 touchdowns. I believe he's added over 10 touchdowns on the ground. And he's contributed to winning football for the teams that he's played for the last 3 seasons. The problem is, over that span, and even before that, when he wasn't starting with the Indiana Hoosiers, he was placing bets, and he got caught after multiple bets being, like I said, both while he was at Indiana, supposedly while he was with Cincinnati, and, whether or not there were people around him that could stop him from doing it. The fact of the matter is that he did it. He was even betting unders against his own team, which is like the cardinal sin. You never do that. And he did it. And now that he is entering his name into the supplemental draft, there are a few questions I think that should be asked. Is the first one is, when's really the last time we had something like this? Now, there have been players that have been drafted in the supplemental draft since Terrell Pryor, but I think the most direct comparison is Terrell Pryor. Back in 2011, he had a scandal along with other Ohio State teammates about selling signatures for tattoos or for cash at a tattoo parlor in Columbus. And I really think that Terrell Pryor is mainly the guy to look at because he was a quarterback. He was a guy who actually was suspended for 5 games in 2012 or in 2011, but he decided instead of being suspended for the half of the season, I'm just going to enter the supplemental draft and see if someone takes me. And they did. The Oakland Raiders at the time ended up selecting Terrell Pryor, and he is an interesting case on the field as much as he is off the field because he ended up changing positions. He became a receiver, and he honestly became a pretty good receiver in the NFL. I believe he had at least one season over 1,000 yards. He ended up playing for the Raiders and for the Cleveland Browns. But that's really it when you think about quarterbacks drafted in the supplemental draft. And you really, we're talking about a guy who was in the supplemental draft for one of the ultimate of reasons. Really not a reason we've ever seen before. You kind of have to go outside of football and look at somebody like Pete Rose, who it wasn't even while he was in college. He just was betting on games that he was involved in. And that's, again, really in sports, at least that's been brought out to the media. It's Pete Rose. It's the NBA scandal for the last couple of years between Terry Rozier. You have guys like Jonte Porter. You have other NBA players, but in football, this is the big example. And I really want to drive that point home because this is going to be a quarterback looking to have a draft selection used on him. Whoever ends up selecting him, if someone does select him, it's going to take away a draft selection for next year's draft. And I honestly feel like if you look at Brendan Sorsby and you look at the teams around the NFL, who really even needs a quarterback? I think the 3 teams that really either A, don't have an option for now, and B, don't have an option for the future, or C, just don't have anything at all. The only 3 teams I see are the Jets, the Browns, and the Cardinals. Even a team like the Indianapolis Colts, I feel like even if Daniel Jones was out of the picture, the Colts would way rather try to make it work with Anthony Richardson than try to bring in somebody like Brendan Sorsby, who literally was betting against his own team a few years ago. And even, aside from that, Brendan Sorsby wasn't necessarily thought of as one of the top quarterback prospects next year in the class that he would have been in with Archie Manning and possibly Julian Sayin and other guys that are going to graduate or be in the draft next year. This is a guy who I think many teams viewed as a day 2 or a day 3 pick. Some obviously felt like he was a first round selection, but that also has to do with the fact that he plays quarterback. It's the most valuable position in the NFL, and even if a guy is a day 3 selection in the third or fourth rounds, that ends up being enough to get somebody in the first round just because they're a quarterback. And so again, I really only view those 3 teams, the Jets, the Browns, and the Arizona Cardinals, as teams that could draft Brendan Sorsby. And if you think about it even more, I would almost even rule out the Jets and the Browns because they, I think, have already had enough scrutiny. They've already had enough whiffs. They've already had enough controversial figures at that position, both recently and in the past, to where bringing this guy into A, both of those markets, and B, both of those situations, it just, I think, would be bad for each of those teams. It would be bad for Sorsby, and it just would be ultimately a waste of time, I think, if he goes to either of those teams. The Arizona Cardinals, to me, are the only team that I think would make sense to take a swing on Brendan Sorsby. He is a guy that could go to Arizona and just sit for a couple of years. He wouldn't have to worry about playing right away. He wouldn't even really, I think, have to be worrying about making good on the draft selection, because if Arizona just feels like, hey, nobody's taking this kid, it's the 5th or 6th round of the supplemental draft, let's just take a flyer and see what is there. Compared to the other options that they have on their team, Brendan Sorsby very well could be the most talented that they could add to that bunch. And I think when you look at it, the risk compared to the reward, if they don't like how he is in the building, if they don't like how he is on the field, if they don't like anything about it, they can get out pretty easily. And I think comparatively to other teams, maybe other teams view that as the same as I'm viewing it with Arizona. Maybe even a team like Pittsburgh, or a team like, maybe the Jets, I guess. If they just really feel like they want to take a swing on somebody, anybody that can maybe win that QB1 position, maybe not in 2026, but in 2027 and beyond, maybe Sorsby is that guy.